Hey guys, tonight we wander into the winding courtyards of 15th century Syria not as warriors or scribes or spice-mad Europeans, but as humble, sleepy witnesses to something so quiet, so soft, that it almost slipped out of the history books entirely. You are here for the hand-washing songs. Yes, actual sung melodies, whispered over soap and silver basins, hummed by bakers, bathhouse boys, and even royal eunuchs. In an age when touch meant both risk and reverence, clean hands were not just about hygiene. They were music, memory, and meaning. You step into a tiled courtyard in Aleppo. It's still warm from the day. A fig tree leans slightly over the edge of a marble basin, and the air smells faintly of neroli, dust, and roasted sesame. You hear it a note, drawn long, low, slow like the start of an oud solo. Then another voice answers. The sound is close, intimate, rising from a group of young men crouched around a basin, washing one by one in rhythm. This is not background noise. This is the ritual. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You tiptoe closer. The group is part of a local madrasa, students in study robes too worn to be ceremonial, but too carefully mended to be casual. They're reciting verses in Old Arabic, half chanted, half sung, as they pass a bronze jug of rosewater down the line. One boy recites, "Clean hands, calm heart, water from heaven," and the next repeats it, the rhythm like a lullaby. You almost don't realize they're scrubbing their hands. The melody isn't flashy. It flows in slow triplets, with pauses between phrases long enough for each boy to pour, lather, rinse. The verses are ancient, passed on like recipes. Some even rhyme with local plants. Time for thought. Myrrh for the soul. You reach into the memory of your own fingers, times you washed your hands without thinking. Times you scrubbed with fury. Times you let warm water soothe you. These boys are washing away the day's ink, street grime, and possibly the residue of copied theological arguments. Now, here's the twist. These songs weren't songs the way we think of Spotify playlists. They were ritual mnemonics, half prayer, half instruction manual, a bit like if your dentist made you hum a verse from Psalms every time you flossed. And here's a kicker. Historians still argue whether these hand-washing tunes were regulated by religious institutions or just folk traditions passed down matrilineally. Some say they were part of fiqh practice. Others say they were just what your aunt sang when scrubbing onions off her hands. Still, they're real. You follow the soft singing through a tiled hallway, past calligraphed inscriptions, and into a warm chamber bathed in lamplight and smoke. The oud player leans lazily against a pillar, plucking a gentle maqam by yati scale. A favorite mode for relaxation, used in everything from lullabies to, oddly enough, surgical prep chants. Yes, surgical. You kneel. A boy places a smooth ceramic jug beside you, water already perfumed. He doesn't speak, just nods. You begin to wash. The first touch of water shocks you cooler than expected. Your fingers flex, and then you sing, softly at first, not words, just the tune. Your breath becomes part of the pattern. You hum along. A fringe manuscript found in a Damascus attic once listed over 40 distinct melodies used for ablutions, each tied to the time of the day, type of soap, even mood, rainy day rhythms, and songs for wedding guests. The courtyard grows quieter now. The oud slows. Even the air thickens. You notice, in a niche on the wall, a cracked tile with a hand-painted verse. To wash is to remember. To sing is to return. You lean into it, not the tile, the truth of it, and just like that, the lesson of the night begins to unfurl. As gentle as water flowing over knuckles, you wake, if one can wake, from a history that lulls more than it stuns, to the rustle of palms and sandals, the soft scuff of linen soles on old stone. You're in Aleppo now, in the shade of the great mosque's outer walls. It's earlier than it feels, but not quite dawn. A group of boys files out of the southern gate. They walk in pairs, giggling too loudly, each balancing a copper basin or a narrow-necked jug. They're not servants. They're talib, students. young boys attached to the mosque's madrasa, but tasked with a very particular chore, maintaining the ritual fountains. You wouldn't think that keeping water running, clear, and cool in 15th century Syria would require small teams of singing children. But here we are. The boys stop at a courtyard where a marble lion spouts a narrow stream into a scalloped trough. One of them starts to hum not loudly, more like a vibration caught between breath and memory. Another picks it up. Soon, they're in unison. The lyrics are simple, something about clean fingers making clean hearts, something about the hands preparing the tongue for truth. It's catchy. It would be on TikTok if 15th century TikTok had existed, which, for the record, would have been 90% cats, 10% very confident astrologers. The Aleppo Fountain Boys, as they're called in a few scattered sources, weren't formally trained singers, but they had repertoire. More than that, they had duties. Certain fountains required specific melodies. One spout near the perfumer's alley called for citrusy notes. Another, by the leather stretcher's wall, needed a melody that mimicked hammering. One mainstream historical fact that's actually pretty charming. There are preserved fragments of fountain lyrics in the Zahiriya Library's older folios lyrics paired with hand-washing guides for traveling faqirs, religious scholars. Some include reminders like, rinse twice on market days, once for gold, once for gossip. You bend over a basin and see your reflection tremble in the copper. Your fingers trail through water cooled by night air. A basin boy offers you soap pistachio green, and oddly shaped like a quince. He grins. Then he sings, "Praise be for every cent." That hides the sins our fingers meant. It's half song, half shade. You smile. This is not just washing. This is accountability. Here's the quirky bit. According to one locale chronicle, some boys used to slightly alter the lyrics to sneak in jokes. One infamous verse involved substituting the phrase palm of peace with goat of gossip, which somehow caused a whole Friday market to dissolve into giggles one spring. The boy was scolded, and later rewarded with an extra lemon square by the imam's wife. Naturally, you step back from the basin. The water settles. A few petals float lazily, drifting toward the drain. And yet, historians still argue whether the songs were ever written down in their full original forms. Some claim they were exclusively oral traditions passed through apprenticeships. Others suggest that musical notation may have existed, but was deliberately destroyed during periods of Ottoman standardization. One theory involves encoded laundry tokens that doubled as song cues. But, well, that sounds a little too Hollywood, even for us. Still, the melodies linger. The boys finish their rounds. A final jug is emptied, and the last droplets land like tiny bells. They pause, bow slightly towards the fountain, and walk on in single file. No applause. No audience. Except you. And now, your ears are tuned differently. You begin to hear the song in the steps of each passerby. The cadence of palms slapped on thighs. The rhythm of copper against stone. It's everywhere. Like steam, like dust, like breath. The Aleppo morning stretches, golden and slow, and somewhere in the corner of the courtyard, a cracked tile reads, "Hands know what tongues forget." You're barefoot now, stepping across a floor still damp from the last rinsing. The tiles are green and white, forming floral starbursts that point you toward the hammam, a bathhouse not just for bathing, not just for gossip, but for singing, steaming, and hand-washing with the gravity of a sacred rite. You pass under a low archway. The air shifts. It thickens with the mingled scent of citrus peel, mint, cedar, and smoke from the oud slowly curling from the coals near the entrance. Somewhere in the haze, someone is already humming. The hammam attendants, broad-shouldered, always barefoot, always slightly stemming themselves, greet you with small nods. One is already seated on a low stool, holding a brass bowl in one hand and a cloth in the other. His voice rolls like velvet dipped in honey. The melody he sings isn't theatrical, it's steady, measured. Every note syncs with a gesture. Pour, lather, scrub, rinse. You kneel beside the marble basin. The floor is warm beneath your knees. Another attendant places a small dish beside you. Inside, a scoop of pistachio oil soap, glossy, smooth, Pale green, it smells faintly sweet, like something between almonds and spring grass. He begins to wash your hands, but this isn't rushed. No 5 seconds under the tap. Now dry on your jeans situation. This is choreography. He sings, softly. The world clings to the nail's edge, so wash till it weeps. You want to laugh because wow, even the dirt gets poetic lines here, but you don't. The song folds around you like a towel fresh from the sun. Mainstream history confirms that hammams weren't just places to clean the body. They were community centers, beauty parlors, conflict resolvers, and, on occasion, stage sets for low-stakes performance art. A 15th-century traveler from Andalusia once described a Damascus hammam as a palace of mirrors and murmurs, where men wash and women rule from the steam. And here's your fringe fact. Some bathhouse attendants were secretly trained musicians. One chronicler in Hama described a particular hammam known for voice baths, where attendants would alternate warm and cold rinses in rhythm with maqam Hijaz scales to soothe melancholy. It's the closest thing the 15th century had to lo-fi hip-hop and a hot towel. You hear the echo of others. A group of men, friends maybe, are seated in a farther chamber. Their voices rise together in what might be a communal chant. The melody skips slightly, then resolves. It's not harmony in the Western sense, it's more like tightly stitched thread, everyone following the same spine. Suddenly, one begins a solo verse, a little too loud, a little off-pitch. The room chuckles, he tries again. This time, perfect. Applause. No, but a few quick claps against wet forearms, a flick of water into the air, a slap of soap against thigh. Praise. Bathhouse style. Historians still argue whether these bathhouse songs were officially sanctioned or if they were a form of resistance against overly rigid public morality codes. Some suggest the verses were originally part of mystical Sufi rituals, later repurposed for daily ablutions. Others think they were purely utilitarian songs to pass the time and ensure the proper number of rinses per limb. Yes, there was a correct number. Yes, your elbows were definitely involved. You lean back, your hands are clean. Cleaner than clean. They feel like the past has been peeled off them. The attendant finishes with a verse whispered like a spell. Let no silence stay beneath the nail. Let no grief dry on the palm. You can't tell if it's a blessing, a warning, or both. The steam swirls higher. The song fades behind you. But your fingertips now hum faintly with memory. It's subtle, but unmistakable, like holding the last note of a lullaby long after the cradle has stopped rocking. You walk out, not scrubbed raw, but unburdened. And as you reach for your sandals, you glance once more toward the green-tiled dome. Someone inside is still singing. The road stretches out beyond Aleppo's eastern gate, where caravans once moved like slow breath across the spine of the Silk Road. You're there now, padding beside a group of merchants half awake, half covered in road dust, and entirely unwilling to start the morning without their hand-washing ritual. They're a mixed bunch. You hear Arabic, Armenian, Turkish, even some old Persian. One man is chewing a fig and reciting something under his breath. Another is tuning a travel-worn rebab, plucking notes between sips of lukewarm mint water. The sound that follows isn't grand. It's not meant for an audience, but it is meant for the hands. The merchant leading the caravan, a silk dealer with a scuffed leather satchel and an emerald ring worn down to a soft oval, stops near a shaded spring. He kneels, opens a small copper flask, and tips its contents into his palms. He hums as he washes, a tune shaped by dust and discipline. Then, a phrase half-sung, half-spoken. New border, new bargain, new soap. Everyone laughs, but they wash too. You settle beside a crate marked with inked characters you can't read. Another merchant joins in. His voice is deeper, drier, but in tune. The song they sing is old, maybe older than the roads beneath your feet. It describes each finger as a part of the soul's contract. Thumb for intent, forefinger for truth, middle for ego, ring for alliance, pinky for mercy. Now here's the mainstream fact. Travelers along this corridor were often bound by hygiene codes built into trade agreements. Certain border posts in Syria during the 15th century required hand washing before customs inspection, not for religious purposes, but to prevent the spread of plague. Traders developed mnemonic songs to remember which station wanted soap, which allowed ash rinsing, and which were dry hand posts only. One traveler's journal even includes a sketch of a merchant with a bubble of musical notes above his head. Early proof that, yes, they sang these instructions like they were directions from Google Maps. And here's the quirky detail. Some of these merchants treated soap like currency. In fact, olive oil soap cakes were often engraved with the seal of the Soap Makers Guild and were traded along with goods. In one case, a traveling apothecary was known to offer custom hand-washing songs to caravan leaders in exchange for dried apricots and fennel lozenges. Music, apparently, was part of the market. You listen closely as one merchant begins a verse meant for the midday wash, shaped in rhythmic steps. 2 palms like pages, rinsed to reveal the next word. He finishes and flicks his hands dry with a flourish. The others copy him. You try it too. It's not just clean, it's rehearsed. There's choreography, timing, tempo. You get the feeling this group has done this on 100 borders, beside 100 wells. Historians still argue whether these hand-washing songs were standardized across trade guilds or improvised by region. Some claim the Aleppo merchants had their own distinct wash-and-weigh melody, while others say the tunes were borrowed from pre-Islamic caravans and remixed with newer Islamic hygiene laws. There's even a theory that one tune's melody bears resemblance to a Babylonian irrigation chant, because apparently, everything eventually becomes a remix. The last notes fade into the heat. Someone repacks their soap tin. Someone else checks a parchment map. The road ahead waits, dusty and loud. But for now, you're still. You dip your hands into the shallow spring. It's cool and quiet. And without meaning to, you hum something old, something shared. Wash before borders. Speak only with rinsed hands. It's still dark when you arrive at the bakery, not the kind with chalkboard menus and indie music. This is Damascus, 1473, and the air is thick with yeast, sweat, and the clatter of wooden paddles smacking hot clay ovens. The street smells like cumin, smoke, and a little bit of something burnt, but no one seems bothered. The bakers are already awake. They've been up for hours. The city needs bread, and bread needs hands, and hands need washing. You duck under the low door frame into a bakery courtyard lit by one torch and one flickering oil lamp that's losing the battle with dawn. 4 men kneel beside a squat copper basin. Their hands are dusty with flour, their arms streaked with soot. They're not talking. They're singing, not loudly, not sweetly, but rhythmically, like the tempo was kneaded into them, along with the dough. One slaps his thighs to mark the beat. Another sloshes water and matches it with a line. Clean hands, hot oven, let no lie rise with the dough. The others grunt their agreement. Rinse, scrub, slap, sing. This is not performance. This is function. This is the calloused choir of Damascus bakers. You settle on an overturned basket, hands in your lap. The music continues, verses about fingers that don't steal dates, palms that don't press poison into pastries, and thumbs that must always feel the dough's heart. Yes, dough has a heart here. Mainstream historical records confirm that Damascus, in the 15th century, had guilds for nearly every trade, including bakers, whose hygiene rituals were closely watched. A spoiled batch of dough could spark suspicion of foul play or worse, bad bread during a festival. In fact, the Muhtasib market inspector was known to do random checks not just on scales and prices, but on the cleanliness of bakers' fingers. But here's the quirky bit. Some bakeries reportedly had singing stones, flat washing slabs carved with hand-washing lyrics in calligraphic script. The stones sat beside the rinsing basin, not to instruct, but to remind. If you forgot the verse, the stone remembered it for you. One stone found in old Damascus read, "He who sings not shall bake not." A little dramatic, maybe, but catchy. The bakers rise one by one, drying their hands on thick strips of linen tied at the waist. The rhythm doesn't stop, it follows them to the table. As dough is rolled, more lines emerge. Wet hands for clean hearts for soft crust. You smirk. Somewhere, Paul Hollywood is nodding approvingly. The morning picks up pace. Orders are shouted. Doors open. A boy runs in, shouting about a merchant who wants 50 loaves by sunrise. The bakers don't panic, they just sing louder. And here's a detail historians still debate: whether the bakers invented their own hand-washing lyrics or whether they were assigned by the guildmaster. Some researchers believe the melodies mimicked the rising and falling of dough in different weather conditions, like a baker's version of barometric forecasting. Others argue the verses were chosen more for their moral tone than practical timing. After all, what better place to teach ethics than in a room where everyone touches tomorrow's food? You walk to the basin. It's empty now, the water long dark with flour and ash. But someone has refilled a second jug, already steeping with orange peel and bay leaf. You pour, rinse, and let your fingers mimic the beat on the rim. Rinse before dough. Speak only through crust. No one hears you, except maybe the stone. You're in the quietest place so far, a narrow hallway lined with books, not just any books. Scrolls, codices, leather-bound volumes with gold-flaked spines. The air is cool, dry, and slightly spicy with the smell of ink, cedar shelves, and old sweat. The kind of sweat that seeps into robes during long debates about divine will and proper margin width. You're in the library of a mosque, somewhere in the heart of Hama. It's late morning, but the light is filtered, drowsy, crawling slowly across the floor as if not to wake the books. A man sits at a low desk with a reed pen in hand and a pot of black ink beside him. He hasn't written anything yet. First, he washes. The process is almost ceremonial. A jug of water rests on a folded towel. He lifts it, pours a trickle over one hand, then the other, and while he does, he hums, not loud, not tuneful, but steady. You lean in to catch the words. Ink flows truer, from hands that have wept. It's not melodrama, it's tradition. You sit across from him on a worn mat. Another man walks by, nods, and repeats the verse under his breath as he sets down a tray of clean paper. The melody passes like a relay baton, one line to another, whispered from mouth to mouth like prayer or gossip. Mainstream historians confirm that cleanliness wasn't just a spiritual requirement in Islamic scholarship, it was a practical one. Manuscripts smudged by unwashed hands could be ruined, and copying errors caused by slippery fingers could alter entire theological meanings. Some libraries even had posted guidelines about ablutions before handling certain sacred texts, particularly ones containing the divine names. But here's a little-known, quirky note. In one lesser-cited manuscript catalog from 15th century Damascus, there's a margin annotation beside a legal treatise that reads, "Dropped ink due to sweaty hands. Scribed again, washed first. Used walnut soap this time." Even then, people were blaming their mistakes on humidity. The hand-washing songs of the scribes weren't poetic indulgence. They were tools, mnemonics, to prepare both body and mind. The verse for drying the hands is especially calming. Water leaves, but purpose stays. Steady hand, clear line, no stain. It's soothing, especially after a page of naughty theological reasoning about the inheritance rights of goats, you heard me. Scholars still argue whether scribes invented their own songs or borrowed them from clerics or Sufi poets. Some propose that entire schools had signature melodies, like alma mater fight songs, but for grammar rules. Others claim there was a standard verse system connected to maqammat, traditional melodic modes, with each mode tied to the type of manuscript being copied. Imagine copying a book of medicine to maqam rast, but switching to maqam saba for legal contracts. It sounds wild, but not impossible. You watch the man's hands again. He dips his reed pen into the ink and makes the first stroke. It's smooth, elegant, no wobble, just a single confident line. You look down and realize you've been washing your own hands this entire time, silently, absent-mindedly, repeating the gesture, the song, even without singing, as burrowed into your bones. And somewhere in the margins of your memory, a soft voice recites, "Words live longer when written by rinsed hands." You close your eyes, you feel the rhythm of reed on parchment, the invisible ink of melody on skin. You follow the sound before you see the source low, echoing, and oddly tender. It's nighttime now, somewhere between moonrise and the hour when even roosters give up hope. You're on the outskirts of the city, where the streets are quieter, softer, a little more forgotten. And then you see them, water carriers. Barefoot boys with bronze jugs strapped across their backs, walking in slow rhythm like drowsy soldiers in a dream. Their job is humble. Deliver fresh water to homes before sunrise, so no one wakes up thirsty or dry. But they don't just pour and go. They sing. You creep behind a crumbling arch and listen. The boy at the front leads, his voice sweet with fatigue. Drop a drop. For mothers who rise before the sun, the next repeats it, and then another adds a harmony that's more yawn than note. The jugs on their backs slosh in counterpoint, a liquid percussion to their lullaby. Mainstream historical records often overlook water carriers, but we know they were essential in Syrian cities, especially before the introduction of Ottoman aqueducts. In the 15th century, many worked in family teams, delivering water on foot, by donkey, or if wealthy, by small wheeled carts. The pre-dawn rounds weren't just practical, they were ritualized. Some households would even leave out a basin and a wrapped sweet in exchange for a sung blessing. You crouch in the shadows as one boy stops at a doorstep, sets down his jug, and begins to pour slowly into a stone bowl set by the entrance. While the water trickles, he sings, "Bless this home and all who rise," with hands that wash and hearts that rise, and it's not loud. It's not for show, but it is real. Here's your quirky fringe detail. One fragment from a merchant's notebook in 1478 describes hearing a water carrier's lullaby so moving that he wept into his bread and gave the boy an extra coin. The note ends with, "Regret, wet bread." You have to love a culture that documents both tears and ruined breakfast. As you walk behind them, something changes. The boy's slow. One is limping slightly. Another offers him a hand. The lead boy shifts his jug to the other shoulder and begins a new verse, this one older, more sacred. Water knows what the tongue forgets. Wash what you can. Carry what you must. Historians still argue whether these water carrier songs were linked to formal Sufi chant traditions, or if they were more closely aligned with the street verse known as Zajal. Some claim the boys belonged to orphan guilds run by local mosques. Others believe the tradition was passed informally between cousins, brothers, even neighbor boys who learned the steps by osmosis. But the consensus is this: their songs mattered, even if nobody wrote them down. Even if no adult clapped, even if the only audience was a quiet doorstep and the curl of steam rising from a waiting teacup inside, you reach your own door now, not a real one. Just one the story builds around you. You find a small bowl ceramic, cracked. You pour from an invisible jug. Your fingers trace the rim. You hum. Wash what you can. Carry what you must. And somewhere far off, in a city half asleep, a boy with tired eyes smiles. You climb now up the steep, stone-paved path that winds along the citadel's southern face. Your sandals scrape as you walk, the chill of pre-dawn sticking to your skin like a second robe. Up here, wind carries whispers, and whispers carry songs. You've made it to the royal quarters. The sun hasn't cracked the sky yet, but light spills from narrow windows trimmed in lattice. A thick cedar door swings open with a low groan, and suddenly, you're inside the upper rooms of the citadel of Aleppo, where nobility prepares for another day of politics, poetry, and polite betrayal. But not before they wash their hands. A eunuch approaches, dressed in layered silk, silent but for the chiming of brass rings at his belt. He gestures toward a basin carved from marble, inlaid with lapis and shell. A young musician sits nearby, tuning a canon. You're not the only one here. Members of the court file in, groggy, dignified, all preparing for the ceremonial hand-washing of the morning. It begins without cue. The first chord strikes, soft, lingering. Lavender oil is poured into a shallow bowl. The fragrance creeps into your lungs like memory. One noblewoman steps forward. She sings, "My hand is no throne, yet still it must shine." The eunuchs respond in perfect harmony, layers of tone shaped like mist around a flame. It's not performance, it's protocol. Historical records confirm that royal hand-washing in 15th century Syria was a formal affair, especially within the court of Aleppo, where hygiene rituals were woven into the daily structure like prayer or chess. Visitors to the citadel were often judged not only by their words, but by the grace with which they performed ablutions and the melodies. Mainstream chroniclers mention lavender mode's specific maqams, reserved for rituals involving scented oils. Makambayati, rast, and sometimes even sika were used. Depending on the social rank of the washer and the season, winter demanded slower rhythms, summer, lighter, more playful ones. Now, here's your fringe fact. One ledger from a royal chamberlain lists a full week of hand-washing musical variations, including one noted as for diplomats with sticky fingers. Was it literal, metaphoric? Possibly both. You glance toward the musicians. One nods to a scribe seated nearby, who jots down the lyrics as they're sung. This is not improvisation. This is history being composed in real time. A young prince too young to shave, but old enough to sigh dramatically, steps forward and begins his verse. I touch the ink of men's lies. Let lavender undo it. A few quiet chuckles ripple through the chamber. The boy knows his audience. Even in ritual, there's room for shade. Historians still argue whether the court's washing songs were purely symbolic, or if they were designed to train memory, test improvisation, or subtly signal shifting political alliances. Some scholars suggest that missed notes or incorrect couplets during royal hand-washing ceremonies could result in social punishment or at least a cold stare from the palace poet. You kneel at the final basin. A eunuch pours warm rosewater across your fingers. The notes played now are slower. As if time itself has thickened, the prince has left. The musicians pack their instruments in silk, but the melody lingers. No throne outlasts a clean hand. You hear it from behind you. You repeat it, almost without meaning to. It sticks to your skin like perfume. As you leave the chamber, the wind picks up. It carries the final chord down the corridors and out across the stone walls of the city. Somewhere below, a water carrier hums the same refrain slower, less refined, but still true. Clean hands, clear heart, lavender mode. You descend now down a narrow alley tucked between rose brick walls where the scent of fresh dough and morning air intertwine. The city is waking, but this house is already alive. A low, yellow glowing doorway opens just long enough for you to slip in. Inside, it's warm and busy, not loud, not frantic, but humming with that soft domestic chaos known only to kitchens before sunrise. And in the middle of it all, women, mothers, midwives, grandmothers with hands like folded parchment, daughters half-dressed in sleep, rubbing their eyes and swaying to the rhythm of water and whisper. This is not a public bath, nor a mosque. It's a private ritual, a sacred passing of song from mother to child. Over ceramic bowls and shared towels, hand-washing here isn't performance, it's inheritance. A little girl stands on a stool beside her grandmother. Her fingers tremble as the older woman gently tips a small jug of jasmine water over her knuckles. Together they sing, not to the room, but to each other. Little fingers, little lies. Wash them now, before sunrise. The child giggles. The grandmother hushes her with a kiss to the crown of her head. Mainstream historical records often overlook domestic rituals, but embedded in private letters and household ledgers from 15th century Syria are references to washing rhymes, especially those used by midwives before deliveries and mothers during early morning preparations for school or mosque. These weren't just instructions. They were lullabies in reverse, not to put children to sleep, but to gently pull them into waking life. One scholar noted that these verses were often syncopated with household rhythms: grinding spice, folding bread, stitching linen. You hear it now. The tap-tap of a spoon against the side of a mortar, the scrape of a sandal across a rug, a whisper. Clean hands before cradle, clean words after. Now the midwife arrives, not old, not young, just centered. She rinses her hands in a blue basin flecked with ash, salt, and a sprig of sage. The song she hums has no words. It vibrates in your chest like a memory you never lived. She picks up a folded cloth, then pauses, closes her eyes, and recites softly, from hand to womb, let no harm pass. The room stills. The baby's not here yet, but the air makes space for her. Quirky fact for you. There are surviving amulets from 15th century Syria, worn around the necks of midwives, etched with song fragments like, "Let the water know the name before the breath does." Some even included notes on proper soap scents for birth blessings, lavender for girls, myrtle for boys, or vice versa, depending on your grandmother's opinions. Historians still argue whether these maternal hand-washing songs had roots in older pagan fertility chants, or were purely shaped by Islamic hygiene laws and folk custom. Some even suggest that certain melodies resemble Byzantine cradle hymns, hinting at centuries of cultural blending across household walls. The girl on the stool is now drying her hands with a strip of linen embroidered in blue thread. She turns to you and recites proud, slow, "Water goes, but the song stays." You nod, and without being asked, you wash your hands in the second basin. The water's barely warm, but it carries the scent of stories told between stitches. As you exit the house, you hear another verse, floating from a side room. Hands that wash can hold truth. Hands that hold truth must wash. You don't need to know who sang it. You already know it by heart. You step back into the sunlight and everything has changed. The alleys buzz. The rooftops tremble with life. Someone bangs a drum. Someone else throws a pomegranate from a second-floor window with impeccable aim. Children dart between stalls holding bright yellow pastries. Lanterns sway even though there's no wind. It's Eid. And here, in 15th century Syria, that means everyone is singing, even the soap. You're in the heart of a neighborhood celebration, surrounded by stalls stacked with copper basins, citrus fruits, flower garlands, and a suspiciously tall pile of turmeric-stained towels. No one's still. Everyone's rinsing, scrubbing, twirling, dancing, and every third step leads back to a water jug. Hand-washing on Eid isn't quiet. It isn't sacred in the slow, solemn way you've seen before. It's joy, foamed and fragrant. A group of boys passes you, each holding a different color bar of soap like its treasure. One sniffs his and exclaims, "Apricot." Another holds up his lemon-scented brick like a victory flag. The leader, wearing a belt of woven date stems, shouts, "Wash before feast," or "Eat with your elbows." Everyone laughs. Then they all sing in rough, chaotic unison. If your hands still smell like goats, you don't get any cake. It's rowdy. It's rhythmic. It's weirdly catchy. Mainstream records of Syrian festivals in the 15th century often mention food, processions, and gifts. But buried between the more official accounts are references to communal washing rituals, particularly before meals, shared prayers, and public games. Families would bring out their best basins, heat water over coals in the courtyard, and sometimes even compose silly washing jingles just for the occasion. Here's your quirky bit. One Aleppan family ledger included a note that reads, "Niece Miriam made up the hand song so ridiculous the imam laughed milk out his nose. Save for next Eid." You admire that kind of archival integrity. Someone presses a cloth-wrapped bar of soap into your hands. It's still warm from the sun and smells unmistakably like bergamot and saffron. You're ushered toward a washing station, a large clay bowl set on a bed of sweet basil. 4 children are already rinsing and giggling and splashing a bit too freely. A woman stands behind them, hands on hips. She begins to sing, and the children freeze like they've been caught mid-heist. Rinse, zone, thumbs too. Don't waste water, or I'll tell your uncle. You stifle a laugh. This is hand-washing as musical theater. Every home becomes a stage, every street corner, a soap opera. Historians still argue whether these festival songs were passed down deliberately or improvised anew each year. Some folklorists claim melodies changed from block to block, like dialects. Others think the lyrics stayed mostly the same, but the verses got more ridiculous each generation. Either way, it worked. It stuck. You begin to wash again. Not because you need to, but because you want to. Because suddenly your fingers itch for rhythm. You add a verse of your own. Water, soap, lemon zest. My hands are cleaner than the rest. Someone claps. Another voice echoes back. Your rhyme is bad, but your hands are blessed. The street erupts in laughter. Somewhere nearby, a boy balances a tray of sweets and sings to himself. I washed so well. Even my lies got rinsed. You don't know his name, but you believe him. And as the sun climbs higher and the crowd grows louder, the scent of citrus foam wraps around you like garland. Hand washing today isn't about purity. It's about joy. It's a neighborhood concert, a chorus of lather, a celebration of being clean enough to share, to feast, to touch. And somewhere in this blur of sound and soap, a child's voice cuts through. Let the world drip, but let me rinse first. And then just like that, the joy fades into silence. Not because the people are gone, But because the water is, you walk east, where the land begins to crack and the air turns to brass. The olive trees wilt, the pomegranate skins wrinkle, and the wells are dry. You've wandered into the dust season. Drought. The streets are quieter here. Tired. You pass shuttered courtyards, empty fountains, and children dragging wooden buckets full of nothing. A woman sits by a cracked basin, her hands dry, her eyes searching the sky like it owes her something. But even here, in the silence, someone sings. It's an old man under a fig tree, sharpening a stick into a flute. His voice is rough, but certain. If you have no water, wash with song. You pause, unsure. Then another voice joins in, this one from a boy crouched on a step, rubbing his palms together as if soap will appear from air. He repeats the line with reverence, wash with song. In 15th century Syria, when drought stretched long and wells went belly up, people didn't stop washing. They adapted. Hand-washing songs became substitutes, ritual simulations, a spiritual placebo. Some families even marked time with verses to mimic the rhythm of pouring, scrubbing, rinsing, drying. Whole households sang their fingers clean. Mainstream records mention seasonal prayer practices during droughts, including specific invocations known as Salat al-Istisqa. But hidden in the footnotes are mentions of dry washing songs performed in schools and market squares. One Damascus diary noted, "We sang the soap verse 3 times before touching our bread. My aunt cried through it. You walk farther. A group of school children sits in the shade, feet coated in dust. Their teacher leads them through a call and response. What do you use when the water is gone? Breath and blessing. What do you clean when you can't pour? The part of the hand that remembers. It's not sad. It's determined, defiant, even. Here's your quirky fact. Some households used small stones carved with floral patterns as symbolic soap during dry spells. They'd hold the stone, sing the washing song, then place it in a bowl as if they'd just used it. One poem carved into such a stone read, "I hold no lather, but I remember the smell." Historians still argue whether this symbolic hand-washing was born out of religious adaptation or poetic stubbornness. Some claim it was an extension of tayammum, the practice of dry purification using earth when water isn't available. Others believe it was emotional theater, a way for families to retain control when everything else cracked. You reach a courtyard, is bare, save for a single cracked jug resting on a pillow of sand. No water, no towel, but beside it, a scrap of parchment with smeared ink that reads, "Don't wait for rain to sing." A woman appears. No more than 30. She places her hands over the jug and closes her eyes. And softly, so softly you hear her sing the same melody you first heard in the Aleppo courtyard. Clean hands, calm heart, water or none. You find your place beside her. You raise your palms. They're dry, caked in dust. But you sing. The dust doesn't leave, but something lifts. The wind shifts again, this time toward chaos. You're back in Aleppo, but the energy is different. This isn't the hush of libraries or the joy of Eid. This is the market, the soap market. And today, it's a war zone. Okay, not literally. No swords, no blood. Just shouting. Lots and lots of competitive, melodic, citrus-scented shouting. You stand at the center of a rowdy plaza lined with stalls stacked high with olive oil, soap, brick after fragrant brick, bergamot, laurel, lavender, pomegranate rind. Even one labeled sandalwood and something mysterious. That one's probably lying. Two men across from each other, rival soap vendors, are locked in a sonic standoff. One beats a copper pan with a wooden spoon. The other waves a carved ladle like a conductor. And both of them are singing, loudly, dramatically, ridiculously. My soap foam's finer than a caliph's thoughts. My lather lasts longer than your second marriage. The crowd cheers. Coins clatter. Someone hands you a free sample wrapped in a scroll with lyrics printed on it. Yes, you've stumbled into a full-blown soap song battle. Mainstream sources do. In fact, mention Aleppo's famed soap district, home to the world's oldest documented hard soap recipes. Traders from Venice, Cairo, and Constantinople all came here to buy by the crate. But few outside sources note how these wares were sold. Locals know it wasn't about pamphlets. It was about performance. Here's your quirky detail. Some stalls hired part-time poets or unemployed madrasa students to write custom, hand-washing jingles for their soap. The more clever the verse, the more likely someone was to walk away with a fresh block and a new tune stuck in their head. A preserved verse, found scrawled on a merchant stall board. Read, buy 2 bars, sing 1 song, scrub your shame away before long. A woman next to you sings under her breath as she sniffs a bright green block. This one smells like my wedding night. You quietly don't ask follow-up questions. At the far end of the market, a child no older than 9 climbs atop a crate and belts out, "Soap that sings is soap that sells. Rub your sins and scandal smells." The crowd roars. A rival vendor throws a towel in defeat. Historians still argue whether these song wars were structured events like soap-based slam poetry or impromptu chaos fueled by ego and competition. Some claim there were written rules. Others say rules were for the boring stalls that no one visited. But even in the chaos, the ritual held. Every bar had a song. Every song had a purpose. Some were funny. Some downright unhinged. But others were quiet. You drift toward a stall nearly hidden in shadow. No yelling, no drumming, just a woman sitting behind a small table with exactly 5 soaps, each wrapped in silk. She sings softly, for widows with empty kitchens, for mothers with shaking hands. Let this soap remind you, clean fingers can still cook. No crowd, no applause, but you buy one anyway. And as you walk away, the melody from her stall follows you, not the loudest, not the flashiest, but the one that feels like truth. Because sometimes, the cleanest hands come from the quietest songs. The walls are whitewashed and worn. You're far from the markets now, deep in the outer quarter of homes, in a quiet place that doesn't appear on any map. No music spills into the alleys here. No soap vendors sing. The air smells of vinegar, camphor, and damp cotton. The silence here is different. This is a leper house, or, more gently put in the parlance of the 15th century, Dar al-Raha, the house of ease. You step through the threshold slowly. Everything is soft. Soft footsteps, soft light, soft hands lifting clay bowls with care. And still, someone is singing. Not loudly, not hopefully, but gently like a lullaby given to the sick instead of the young. You follow the voice to a corner room where a woman with a wrapped headscarf tends to a man whose fingers are bandaged and curled. She holds his hand in her lap and dips a cloth into warm water scented with thyme and rose. She sings, "If your skin forgets how to feel, let the song remember." She's not washing him out of necessity. His condition doesn't demand it anymore. She's washing him so he remembers he's human. Mainstream sources rarely elaborate on these houses. Most mention them in passing as footnotes to broader studies on urban medicine or religious charity. But hidden in the Waqf records, charitable endowment documents are clues. These homes were supported by quiet donations, built not just for treatment, but for dignity. And here's the quirky detail. Some records describe song lists kept by caretakers. Not medical records, not dosages. Songs. Each patient had a preferred hand-washing verse. Some were the same melodies used by scholars, others unique, fragments of childhood. Love songs twisted into healing prayers. One sheet, al-sheet, found between 2 pages of a prayer manual, reads, "Patient, Amir, wash tune, market soap seller's daughter, mood, calm, avoid sad maqams. You breathe in. The scent of the water is so gentle it feels like a whisper. You sit beside another patient, eyes closed, hands twitching, and you hear his caregiver sing softly. Water for wounds, warmth for what won't mend. You're not here to fix anything. You're just here to witness." Historians still argue whether this style of hand-washing ritual came from Sufi healing traditions or evolved uniquely within leper houses. Some trace its roots to early Christian anointing hymns. Others believe it was entirely local, born from necessity, shaped by compassion. You don't need an answer. You just sit in the quiet. Across the room, a boy sings to himself while folding a towel. "I washed my father's hands before he forgot my name." No one corrects him. No one stops the song. You rise and step outside. The air is cooler now. You reach for the small water flask at your side. Pour a little over your fingers and mimic what you saw. A slow, circular motion. A low hum. A verse not for health. Not even for history, but for hope. Wash not to cure. Wash to remember. The library doors are heavy. They creak when they open. but not out of age, out of memory. You've returned to Damascus, but not to the bustling quarters. This is the edge of the city, where scholars fade into ink and silence. Here, tucked between forgotten manuscripts and long-sealed cabinets, lie the echoes of the songs that almost didn't survive. You're here to find what's been erased. The room is dim, no oil lamps, no candles. Just a slit of sunlight sneaking in from a cracked window. Dust hovers like question marks. You brush your fingers along a shelf of brittle scrolls, listening for something. Not a voice, not a tune, just the suggestion of melody buried under silence. Then you hear it, a rustle, a throat cleared. An old man, thin, slightly translucent, like he's more parchment than person, sits cross-legged with a scroll across his lap. He's not reading aloud. He's humming. It's the melody from the water carriers. But slower, he hums as he copies, not a scribal song of ink, a different kind, a lullaby for ghosts. He writes a few more lines, then pauses, leans back, and closes his eyes. You approach, and he speaks without looking. They used to sing before touching a book. Now, only I remember which verse came first. He hands you a scrap of parchment. It's barely legible. The ink has bled, the edges burn, but you can still read. First the hands, then the eyes. No wisdom touches dust. Mainstream scholars acknowledge that many traditional hand-washing songs vanished during the Ottoman period. When centralized regulations and shifting aesthetics phased out local ritual practices, some melodies were deemed unsanctioned, others simply forgotten. A few were preserved in private prayer books, family journals, or scrawled in the margins of law texts that had nothing to do with soap. Here's your quirky fact. 1. Damascus families secretly passed down a washing song as part of a wedding ritual hidden in a recipe for rose jam. When recited correctly, the jam instructions double as a verse about preparing the soul for study. Sweet, sweet, sticky subterfuge. The old man sighs. He tells you that his grandmother sang to him while boiling water for her ink, that his father hummed a tune before weighing spices, that he once heard a midwife at a funeral whisper a washing verse not for the body, but for the grieving hands left behind. Historians still argue whether these song fragments can truly be reconstructed, or if doing so distorts their intent. Some believe we should let them die quietly. Others think they're already encoded hidden in the cadence of old recipes. The pauses in traditional prayer. The rhythm of broom bristles on tile. You ask the old man if he remembers a verse for forgetting. He nods. When the hand forgets, the basin sings. When the basin dries, the silence remembers. You both sit for a while. No one sings, but the silence bends. A cracked tile behind him reads, "Not all songs are sung aloud. Not all waters rinse." And somehow, it's enough. You're walking now not in any particular direction, but through time itself. The streets blur behind you. Courtyards stretch out like breath. The sound of water has faded into memory, but something still clings to your skin. Not soap, not scent. A rhythm. You don't see anyone else, just rooftops and shadows, but the songs are still here, whispering under tiles, echoing from copper basins long cold, curling beneath fingernails that haven't touched a jug in 500 years. And then, at last, you stop. You're alone on the riverbank, or what's left of it. The Orontes flows nearby lazy, low, barely moving, but enough to remember. You kneel. Your hands hover above the water. You don't rush. You've been here before. Not this exact place. Maybe, but here, in this moment, this posture, this knowing. And then you begin. You rinse your hands slowly. Left, then right, then together. And you hum, not loudly, not clearly, but with certainty, like the water is listening. To wash is to remember. To sing is to return. You've heard that line before. On a tile. In a hammam. In a song stitched into silence. You wash like a scribe about to write. Like a baker preparing dough. Like a girl on a stool learning to recite. You wash like someone who believes memory lives in the space between fingers. Mainstream historians may never agree where these rituals came from. Were they mystic? Were they domestic? Were they just clean hands with rhythm? But your body remembers. Here's one last quirky truth. A 15th century Syrian astrologer once claimed that singing while washing hands aligned the pulse with the movement of Jupiter and brought harmony between muscle and mercy. He also believed soap had a soul. He was laughed at, of course. And then, a century later, someone copied his washing song into a medical notebook on wound care. History doesn't delete. It folds. You finish rinsing. You dry your hands on the hem of your robe, now damp with a story too old to own. Behind you, a voice sings, not one you recognize, not one you need to. It could be a boy with a jug, a mother with a basin, a rival soap vendor, a scholar, a leper, a prince, or you, because by now, you are all of them. Your hands are theirs. Their songs are yours. And the silence you carry home will hum forever with lavender, bergamot, time, and memory. And now, as the last notes dissolve into dusk, you begin to feel it. The weight of your arms softening, the hum of your breath slowing, evening out. Your fingertips still warm from phantom water. No longer scrubbing, no longer grasping, just resting. Let the last images settle gently. A cracked tile, a copper bowl, a basin that knew your name before you did. The wind is quiet now. Even the river seems to pause between ripples, as if it too remembers the song. No one calls your name. No one hurries you forward. The journey has slowed, stretched, melted into memory. And the memory is clean, so let it stay. Let your hands rest where they are, relaxed, on soft sheets or folded across your belly. Let your breath move like water unhurried. Without ripple, let the last verses repeat, not as sound, but as feeling. Clean hands, calm heart, water or none. Let the basin fade. Let the tiles blur. Let the street sounds dissolve into soft, velvety dark. You are rinsed of noise now. Rinsed of day. Rinsed of needing to know where one verse ends and another begins. Let sleep come not all at once, but drop by drop, like the water that once traced your knuckles, as if your body were a vessel being filled again. And when you finally drift like steam curling from the last bowl on the windowsill, the song will still be with you, even in the silence.